I'm sure this is a cliche question to ask an author, but when you're writing a book, I don't think you could ever imagine this happening with the book. But is it something you thought about at all, like what a movie version of this would look like while you were writing it? Because to me, when I read it, I was like, how could anybody ever turn this into a movie? It'd be impossible.
That was my thought too. Right from the get-go, and I came to fiction writing from starting out as a screenwriter, and I had such a dispiriting experience with my first movie getting made, and watched, kind of lost control of my story and the characters, and was powerless to do anything about it, and had always wanted to be a screenwriter up to that point. And then once I actually saw what the job was and saw, how hard it was, it made me rethink that and make me wonder, maybe I want to write fiction, so I have more control over my story and my characters, and I can just geek out directly with my audience to the reader and drill down as deep into geek culture as I want to, and not worry about it ever getting made as a movie. And then also the idea that I had conceived of mashing up all of pop culture inside the Oasis. I knew, if I want to, my idea was to write a story and use that pop culture shorthand that you use when you're talking to your friends, and the way that you weave references and stuff, when you're geeking out with your friends. And I wanted to try to tell a story with that voice, but I knew that would probably prohibit the chances of it ever being a movie, just because I knew enough about licensing. Like my first movie, Fanboys, like would have been impossible to make too if Lucasfilm hadn't given us permission to use Star Wars, and this was like that times 1,000. So I just assumed it could never be a movie, and then also.
So did I, by the way.
Yeah.
Even when I first read it, I thought,
how is it possible?
Right, I just thought this is cool, but the scale of this is impossible to do.
So I thought it would have to be, but it would either have to be drastically scaled back, or it might get made a movie that would barely resemble the story, and and that was part of the reason it was more difficult when we did start to adapt it, was because I had written it. I'd written it in such a way that it was intended to just be a novel, and I did things that would only work in a novel, and the first-person narrative especially kind of limits your storytelling ability as to what happens with the other characters. So Wade kind of ended up doing everything, and also everything's told from his perspective, and also he does a lot of the challenges are not cinematic at all. They're playing classic video games, or
Pac-Man,
reenacting an old D&D module, stuff that works great and is fun in the book and lights up your imagination, but in a movie would just stop the story dead. And especially this story, and the way that Steven had structured it, is like a roller coaster. Once you have that first setup and establish the contest, then it just never.
Right. I mean, we had the scene where the guy plays Pac-Man for 4 hours in the early cut.
Ty shot it too, right?
Yeah, he did. I mean, he trained for 6 months, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
It just was like, what?
First test screening, people
and
were like,
everybody's dying because it's taking so long.
Yeah. So I knew that there were going to have to be drastic changes, and and like I've said in other interviews, like once Steven Spielberg came on board, he has such an amazing track record with book to film adaptations, even science fiction. Really complex stuff like Jurassic Park. He manages to distill that down, and all that exposition. There's a lot of exposition about DNA and everything else in Jurassic Park that he manages to distill and make entertaining. And then as soon as that is set up, then you're on a roller coaster ride. And that's, I feel like he pulls that same amazing magic trick with Ready Player One and sets up the Oasis and the dystopian future and the virtual world and everything. And then it's on.
When I was reading the book, I read it in 3 days. I'll never forget it. It was a couple years ago. Right when it was right after Spielberg had just signed on to the project, and I was blown away by what the references were. I'm curious what the choice was to remove the Spielberg references.
I think it was a smart move. He basically
I agree.
Felt like this was to refer to himself was going to take you out of the story, and that is not what interests him at all. I mean, he wants you to be caught up in this story. It's not. He's not Lars von Trier. He's not trying to create some sort of Brechtian experience where you're. I don't think.
He doesn't have an ego. He doesn't need to. He doesn't have anything else to prove, and
Totally.
he doesn't need to. Everybody, the whole world has celebrated him for decades, so he doesn't need to celebrate himself at all. And which is how he viewed referencing his own stuff. So that was why it fell to me and Zach and Adam Stockhausen and other people to say, well, we're going to pay tribute to the decade of the 1980s and even the late 70s and 1980s. We can't do that without touching upon some stuff that you had a hand in. And usually he would say yes if it was something he had just produced, somebody else's film that he had just been behind.
Well, the
scenes.
DeLorean, right off the bat, he was like,
It's still him.
Well,
speaking. It's
but like
Zemeckis,
even in the
but
first meeting, he was like, I'm going to have to call Bob,
Yeah.
so because that has to be in the movie. But But yeah, that was, it really, once you get past that though, Steven is all about story, so one of the things that's refreshing is, and it's good as a writer to have somebody who's guiding you, who's saying, no, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, we have to go down this way. So that's what determines what references are going to be made and what aren't, because if they're related to story, someone playing Joust, I like Joust. Joust was a big part of my childhood. I wouldn't mind watching someone play a real life version of Joust, but it's not tied in to the story in the same way Adventure is, for example. So that kind of tells you, are we going to do someone playing real life Joust? Maybe, maybe not. Can we afford to get rid of Adventure? Probably not. We have to find a way to work it in there. I don't want to give away too much.
But and that's what I loved. Like even the references that were maybe a big set piece in the book are most of them are all still there. Maybe if it's just like a poster on the background, or like we had a big tribute to Rush 2112 in the book.
Yes.
And now
there's a poster in the movie.
There's a poster,
Rush
yeah.
2112
And a T-shirt.
And T-shirt when you first meet.
It's in Holiday's room.
Yeah. And also when you first meet Lena's character, H, in the real world, she is wearing the same exact T-shirt that her character is wearing in the book when you first meet her. And that was something that was never mentioned in the script, but somehow made it from the book into the movie, because even the costume department...
Well, right, they would all... There'd be lots of times where, in the production, when Ernie wasn't there, where people were taking stuff from the book. In fact, I often, because Steven's very secretive about the script, there'd be times where I'd be like, oh, no, that character is gone now and has a different name, or that's not who IROC is. In fact, I think there was one point where someone wanted to bring IROC as he existed into the book as a character, character that. I was like, no, we already used IROC for another one. So there was definitely, but there's a lot of people going back to, to not only to the book, but to Ernie himself as inspiration for elements in the movie.
And
sorry, John, we gotta move on.
Sure. Okay. Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, please.
One last thing. Last thing. I kind of just realized it during this interview about a really great reason for Steven not to want to reference his other movies is this is a brand new Steven Spielberg movie. That your people are going to be referencing from here on out. Once they see it, like why stop this brand new Steven Spielberg movie to reference Steven Spielberg movies from the past? Like I think maybe that's just one step too meta.
Too meta.
Yeah. And so